Welcome back to the Press Club. We're going to shift our focus to COP21 happening in Paris over the last 2 weeks or so. We've had over 190 countries, thousands of representatives from those countries in Paris, France, for the Conference of Parties, or COP21, with the hope and expectation that it will be coming out with a legally binding agreement among all those countries for a cap on carbon emissions across the globe. The goal was 2% or less. The Caribbean and Pacific Islands went in there pushing for 1.5 under the campaign 1.5 to stay alive. The suggestion being that if anything higher than 1.5 or 2 degrees would mean the eradication or devastation of those small island countries. You already see the case of the Marshall Islands, where they're barely above sea level, being severely impacted by climate change, and we have what has been known now as climate refugees, you know, where a lot of the Marshallese are leaving to go to the United States, a special part of, I think, Arkansas in
fact,
US.
in one of those Pacific Islands, the cabinet held a meeting underwater to draw attention to the fact that, you know, the cabinet, they went with the swimsuits and the goggles and the thing, and they had a cabinet meeting underwater. It was on TV. How you missed that? They show it every now and then because it had never happened before, but it was a striking a manifestation, a striking way to show people how much they're threatened, because the island is sinking as the water rises, and they estimate that in less than a decade, if things continue, the whole island will have submerged. So the cabinet held that cabinet meeting underwater with the world press attending underwater.
Yeah. But it's a very serious situation. Let's not we can't get away from that. And I do think the severity of the situation has been lost on anybody attending COP21. The issue, I think, for them, and there are a number of issues, but I think that the overarching issue is the transitionary period. What happens during that time? Yes, we need to reduce it by at least 2 degrees Celsius, but in the interim, I mean, we look at the statistics up until 2030. Right now, we're looking at coal power industry accounting for about nearly 50%, 40-something%, and it's going to the alternative energy accounts for about 9%. It's going to stay that way until about 2030, when alternative energy would account for about 20%. So between 2015 and 2030, there's a long time. The emphasis now, I think, is on developing research for one, and developing alternative technologies to replace, you know, the carbon emitting technologies. You know, but that's not going to happen overnight.
Well, I think the emphasis has to be, I forget what's the name of the politically correct term being used these days, but the emphasis during that period has to be addressing the negative effects on climate change on the countries that are most vulnerable, small island developing states in particular. So equally important alongside the 1.5 to stay alive was the demand by the world that the developed countries do deliver on their promises to contributions towards the Green Fund, which they had agreed as far back as last year that in 2015 the Green Fund at Paris would be 500 billion US dollars. As to whether, I doubt very much that we're going to see it, because it has never happened. Pledges have never been fulfilled, not even met halfway. And as much as, I mean, I'll be the first to say, hey, people, if it happens, I doubt it will. As we speak today, Saturday, as you correctly pointed out, the meeting was to have ended yesterday, but you know, you're talking about 190 countries in a room discussing issues that some see as having to do with whether we're saving the planet or not, whether the Earth is going to survive or not, the whole question of the emissions, whether islands are going to survive or not. So these large multilateral meetings have a tendency to go beyond the time, except if you have one declaration that everybody agrees. But since every individual country would have its stake involved there, Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, along with his entourage, they recognize, as we all do, that it all cannot happen in one day. But they also recognize that COP21, the 2 weeks was not enough. So they have agreed to have another global climate change conference in March of next year to review the decisions taken this year, this weekend in Paris, and to provide a forum to begin to put in place the things for the next 15 years. So that I look forward to positive things like we all do. There is a feeling, and the Nationwide has about 6 or 7 pages dedicated to that. And all of those good vibes were coming out there because I think the developed countries which contribute to the most to the climate change, negative climate change effects, they have come to the realization that there's nowhere to hide. They can no longer claim that they were not responsible, and therefore they could no longer say, you know, we are ready yet. So it is one where the developing countries, who have always been and continue to be the majority in international relations, they describe themselves as the elephants in the room because their numbers, their demands, and their strength in numbers, if not, certainly not in economics and power, but in numbers at the level of the international body, United Nations, allows a situation, for example, where St. Lucia in South Africa were able to extract from Australia an agreement before the discussion that Australia will back 1.5. Now, Australia is huge, an island continent, and Australia has influence over the Pacific islands. And if Australia, as the big Pacific power, it says that it's going to support 1.5, which the Prime Minister indicated, then it will be difficult for other developed countries to say, no, we're sticking to 2. Because the case has been made, and we have to say, Dr. James Fletcher, St. Lucia's minister, who is the minister responsible at the CARICOM level for presenting the CARICOM case. We have to look at the role that St. Lucia played in COP21. Dr. Fletcher was leading not just the Caribbean call, but the AOSIS, Alliance of Small Island States. So he was speaking for small islands around the world, including the Caribbean. Dr. Didacus Jules, another St. Lucian, head of the OECS, he addressed the conference in a graphic way using illustrations, etc. And therefore, these 2 gentlemen, more one than the other, but certainly both of them, their contributions have been picked up by the international media. Dr. Fletcher was quoted in about 8 or 10 different global media outfits, and it can only augur well for St. Lucia, OECS, CARICOM, the Caribbean, in the period ahead, because whatever footprints they would have put in the sand in Paris this year are going to be there to be lengthened, broadened, deepened, widened in the period between now and March, as well as in the period between March and 15 years down the road. So I think we have reason to be optimistic, but the optimism has to be tempered because there's no way the developed countries are going to agree to everything one time. Because they are quite afraid of what it would mean for them. you know, the repercussions. It's like the whole reparations argument. You know, some European countries don't want to even talk about it, because if they admit responsibility, you know, for what went down, then it's an admission also that you have to make amends.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There's a lot of room for optimism. A lot of things have happened, certainly, that I didn't expect. We've had the U.S., Canada, 79 other countries now being joined by Brazil in what is being called the ambitious move toward the 2 degrees and now 1.5. There's two sticking points remain, you know, and I don't see that being settled today at all. That is the differentiation issue, where because of your size and your wealth, you expected certain things are expected of you, as well as the need for transparency, which the U.S. calling on countries like China to have a
more open.
No, but to have one gauge or one method by which you measure, you know, as opposed to each country having its own system, you know. So those are the two sticking points, and I don't see those being resolved. So as the week progresses, it'll be interesting to see.
But things have started to happen.
Yeah, at least, you know. So like you said, there's room for optimism. There's no room for us to continue this discussion because we're out of time, but
this is the last show for the year, you know.
Yeah,
and the time running faster.
And they give us no leeway. But it's a short break, so we'll be back here next year. Hopefully we can see some of the changes that we've been proposing for the show.
Well, how do we say it? Happy National Day, Happy Christmas, Happy New Year, and Happy next year.
Yeah. Mr. Bousquet, it's always a pleasure having you. It's always a pleasure having you join us. So I'll take the opportunity now, since we won't get another one, to wish you the same thing that he just wished. Happy New Year. I hope you are safe. Enjoy a safe Christmas, and we'll see you back here in the new year.